Hello and welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul, co-host Justin Baker, joining me via Skype because I'm a bastard and moved away. So, not really moved away, but like 45 minutes or so away is a trip to make. So, on a weekday, here we are via Skype to bring you the first ever annual Mid-season Futility Awards for the worst of the worst. And Justin, I have to admit, I am actually quite excited for this because often we do mid-season awards, and that was originally the thought. And I, mid-season awards. And then I just got to thinking about how bad the Buffalo Sabres were, and it really made me want to just do a list of all the bad.
I love it. And I you know what? First off, let me just say, Mark, even if it's a 45-minute drive, no trip is too far to come see you. So let's just put that out there.
Wow, that is very, very kind. I mean, I would agree. I'm happy to. We got to figure out a way to. You could come here and I can go there, and we'll just have two studios now. It'll be great. I
love it.
And then when we have famous guests on our show, we can be like, yeah, did you want to go to the White Lake campus, or do you want to go to the West Garden City campus? Whichever.
Yeah,
one.
It's always going to be yours. Let's be honest.
To come visit the logs. Hey, do you want to smell some wood? Come out to my house.
Just feel like a man out there.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, yeah. There's an obligatory 3 trees that you have to chop down in order to come out here. I moved to 5 acres, so that's why we're joking about being in the woods, because I went from having neighbors that were about 20 feet away, maybe 30 feet away in terms of how far apart our houses were, to actually, I'm sure it was less than 30 feet, to now I think there's at least 100 to 150, depending on the house, maybe more than that. Once all the leaves are in, I don't think I'll be able to see anybody. So I'm looking forward to that day. All right. So the Futility Awards, where do we want to start? I mean, so run down just, the awards that you have decided to hand out on the first ever mid-season Futility Awards. Also, this means that we're going to have an end-of-season Futility Award or maybe we don't. Maybe we never. We'll only do this mid-season.
I don't know. I kind of like this so far, so maybe we do it at the end of the year. We'll have that talk.
Love the doo-doo. All right, let's do it.
All right. So what I have for our listeners, I have least valuable player, worst defenseman, worst defensive forward, worst goaltender, worst team, worst coach, worst rookie of the year, least gentlemanly, and worst GM. Now we can come up, maybe eventually down the road, we could come up with our own award names for these, which would be fantastic.
That's so true. We do need to have some award names. Wow.
Yes.
This could get good. This could get real good.
It could. So anyways, that's what I have now. Contrary to maybe a lot of the awards that they hand out for, most valuable player, best defensive forward, that kind of stuff, they typically take into account where the team finishes versus their, point totals, what they did on and off the ice, that sort of stuff.
Sure.
I kind of took into account too, at least when I was looking at a lot of these players and goaltenders, coaches, what have you, where the team was in the standings, what team they played for, and maybe, took into account, okay, if they're on the worst team in the world, maybe give them a little bit more grace than maybe someone who's on a really good team that's just doing really bad statistically. So again, we'll weigh all those things in there. So
yeah,
that's what I have. And
obviously, the worst defenseman isn't going to go to a guy who's the number 7 defenseman on the Anaheim Ducks. That's
right.
That's not obviously this isn't hey, who's the least talented defenseman? No, this is who is so far below expectations that they are deserving of such an award, to ridicule and just completely put down the way they've played all year. In fact, that maybe these should just be the bully awards. We're just going to bully these players.
Absolutely.
Into submission. This is it's constructive criticism, because our hope is that these guys pick their games up, and that you don't ever want to be on this list twice. Hopefully you figure your stuff out, or you just call it good and retire. I guess those are the options, right? All right. Well, which award do you want to start with?
You know what? Let's start with an easy one. Let's go least gentlemanly.
Least gentlemanly. Okay. Go ahead. Who's your least gentlemanly player in the NHL?
So I am giving this award to none other than Austin Watson from the Ottawa Senators.
Is it because of what he does off the... Oh.
I did actually think about that, but no, he actually leads the NHL in fights with a total of... I actually was expecting quite a bit more than this, but only 6 fights for him, and the next closest is 4 fights. Obviously, fighting's going down in the NHL.
Sure.
And, he finishes... Right now, he's currently sitting in 12th in terms of penalty minutes with 40. Brendan Lemieux leading that category with 59 penalty minutes. But Austin Watson actually has played, quite a, limited number of games. And I actually did look at, there's another person on this list. I don't know if maybe he made yours, but Curtis Gabriel with only 11 games played and has 55 penalty minutes.
I did see that. Yes, I did see that.
Yeah, but for me, I got to go with Austin Watson here.
Okay. I kind of kept it simple. I look at, here you have penalty minutes and Brendan Lemieux just leading the way. So I went with Brendan Lemieux because, 59 penalty minutes for this guy in 31 games. And not only, he's only playing 10 minutes a game. He's got 31 shots on goal. He scored twice, but he's got 59 penalty minutes. So to me, that is just... You're in a place where not only is he, grabbing these penalties, he's not Curtis Gabriel with his 5 minutes a game, but I mean Curtis Gabriel is what he is. But yes, Brendan Lemieux taken 17 penalties, which is also only second to Jordan Greenway on the Minnesota Wild, but at least Greenway is putting up some big points. He's got 21 points. He's doing some things, but it's Jordan Greenway. Or you could always go with sorry, I was just looking at the wrong list. Nikolai Nyjev. I don't even know how to say his name. He's on the Sharks, defenseman, but he has a -12 in terms of penalties drawn and penalties taken. So you could also point to him. He's drawn 3 penalties and he's taken 15. So not the most gentlemanly guy, but I understand you also have to put into account how many times a guy fights. Now, one interesting thing, no player has 2 game misconducts yet this season. There are 4 with a misconduct penalty. That's Max Domi, Brendan Lemieux, Zach Bogosian, and Trent Frederick. But no 2 game misconduct. So that, if there was somebody with a bunch of game misconducts, then you could really point and go, well, that guy's a dick. But there's only been 13 game misconducts handed out thus far this year. So it shows you that maybe the players are overall more gentlemanly than they once were. Definitely more gentlemanly than the 70s,
I will give you that.
Easy. Okay. What do you think? Worst defenseman?
Let's do it.
Worst defenseman. I mean, I'll start here. I feel as though, as much as I don't like plus minus, Rasmus Dahlin sitting at a -33. He's 10 worse than the next guy and 13 worse than somebody not on his team. 16 worse than the next guy not on his team, Sam Bennett. -33. He only has 2 goals, 12 points. He's also, he's taken 7 penalties, so he's got 14 penalty minutes. He's just not doing it for me. And not only that, I mean, as far as his shot attempts, his Corsi, and all that, it's at about 49%, which isn't absolutely terrible. He's definitely not the worst on his team, but he is supposed to be. He's the number 1 defenseman on this team. He was the first overall pick. He is supposed to be the guy. And even on a bad team, you want a star player to be in a position to push the needle forward for your team. And he has just not been able to do that. He struggled at multiple times during the year. And I've heard it said, basically, if you want the Buffalo Sabres, you want to figure out their problem, he is the first place to start. You have to get him right before anyone else. He's the most important player outside of Jack Eichel. Like, we know who Jack Eichel is, but Rasmus Dahlin needs to be a stud for a long time, and he is really he's looking rather average, and that is just not going to cut it.
Yeah, boy, that one's a hard one to argue with for sure. I mean, and I do feel bad for the kid. He's only 20 years old, and defense is, in my opinion, the second hardest position to really be good at, or at least in terms of takes time to develop into and be very good at, right? I mean, we looked at some of the greats. Obviously, you can come in and you can dominate offensively, but to get both ends of the ice working just so perfectly, it takes a while to do.
Sure.
And not everybody's going to be good at it. So.
I don't disagree, but the first overall pick, I mean, you're just expecting more.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can't disagree with you. I mean, so for me, I didn't choose Rasmus Dahlin as much as I actually wanted to. But I took Nikita Zaitsev from the Ottawa Senators. Not to keep picking on Ottawa, but man, I looked at when I looked at Corsi, the Fenwick against, all these even strength numbers against, and right up at the top there's Thomas Chabot, right, for pretty much both of these categories, in terms of even strength shots plus blocks and misses against. But Nikita Zaitsev is right up there with him, although, again, Thomas Chabot will have that offensiveness to his game. Zaitsev is there to be the defensive stud, and you can see he gets 62% of his zone starts in the defensive zone, playing over 20 minutes a night. This guy just isn't putting up the points. I mean, obviously not supposed to be a dynamic offensive player, but the plus-minus isn't there. He's only managed to scrap together 12 points and negative 14 at this point. So,
he's pretty terrible.
Yeah. The PDO, again, for those who don't know, it's just basically the goals against plus save, or the save percentage plus, shot attempts, that sort of thing. And it's under 100, which you want to be at 100 to be a decent player. And it's not good. So.
Yeah. And the PDO can kind of point towards maybe getting a little unlucky, because if your shooting percentage is really low when you're on the ice and your goalie's not making a lot of saves, that can also play a huge factor in that. But yeah, we can get to goalies in a second, because I think that goalies for Ottawa definitely deserve some kind of tip of the cap when it comes to futility. Defensive forward?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, who do you have?
I have...
the worst defensive forward, I should say.
The worst defensive forward. I have from the Philadelphia Flyers, and you might see this team pop up a couple more times here, Nolan Patrick.
Yeah, he's been...
Yeah, he's been pretty bad. And so when you look at plus minus, right, and I know you and I have talked about this before, we don't like at least I don't like to use plus minus as the measuring stick for a lot of things, right? But when you look at the league leaders in minus, right, the worst plus minus in the league, out of the top 10, 7 of those players are from Buffalo, right? So
which plus minus tends to shift and point towards how bad a team is more than anything. Like Rasmus Dahlin, I do think that he truly has been the least met expectations at the lowest level in the NHL as far as defensemen go. But his minus 33 is more of a result of the team around him and the goaltending around him than it is necessarily of the offense that he's producing. He's still not producing much offense. He's still not pushing the needle that much, but the team around him has been absolutely awful.
Yeah. So for me, Nolan Patrick comes in as my worst defensive forward, sitting at the 5th worst plus minus at negative 20. This kid through 34 games. I'm glad to see him back on the ice, but only 7 points so far, 5 even strength points. He's getting second and third line ice time, roughly close to 14 minutes per game. So it really, he's out there for a lot of goals against, clearly. But wherever he's playing, it's not producing. And I know Philly's had their recent goaltending struggles with Carter Hart, but from what I've seen, the limited amount of games I've watched him play and the clips I've seen, he just looks a little lost. At least that bottom six does for Philadelphia, and it just doesn't
He's looked lost his entire career.
Well, yeah. So for me right now, I have to point towards Nolan Patrick.
Okay. I certainly considered Nolan Patrick, him being so low on plus minus and being on a team that was supposed to be freaking lock for the playoffs. According to some experts out there, some people really thought that Philadelphia was a lock for the playoffs. I don't know who.
Of course.
Some misguided fools. But my least defensive player is, and this may or may not be his only award of the day, is the recently traded Columbus left winger Patrick Laine. Patrick Laine has just been awful in terms of producing offense. He has a 41.8 Corsi, which is good for any player playing more than 20 games. There's only 12 players who are worse than him, and none of them average more ice time than him, which he's only getting 14.23 a game. But all the players under him are, for the most part, considerably less. So he's on the ice a lot. He's not producing anything, and he's a minus 11. Yes, he has 9 goals in 28 games. He's on pace for basically a 25 goal season, which for him, it's not great. But last year, it was that defensive side of his game that was really touted. Like, hey, he's really trying. He's worked on his defensive game, and he was finding his way. There are people talking about how well he had developed defensively, and you look at what he's doing. Not only is the needle not being pushed, it is going the wrong way. When he is out there, the Blue Jackets are getting peppered whenever he's on the ice. So he's not creating offense, and really he's not stopping much from going in. And so it's he's getting 63.8% of his starts in the offensive zone. That's decently high. He's definitely not being hurt by 75% of his faceoffs are in the defensive zone. Then you could understand why he might have some lesser numbers in terms of possession, but he's starting the vast majority of the time, basically 2 of every 3 faceoffs in the offensive zone. So it's baffling to me how he's been just so bad, and maybe it's just obviously the connection of the coach and all that too. But a coach and a player disagreeing on how to play only goes so far. He's still getting 14 minutes a game, and he's sucking every time he's out there. So it's Patrick Laine.
It's a contract year. So
Yep. And I don't think that he's going to stay. I don't think he'll sign there.
No,
I think they're going to have to trade him again. In which case, you just traded your franchise center for a guy you thought would come in and score you a bunch of goals. And now he doesn't like it there. Now you're going to have to choose. Now, if they fire John Tortorella, he might sign there.
Yeah, we'll see.
That's the only way. Okay, what award are we going to next? Should we do worst coach since we're
Let's do worst
floating
coach.
Around coaches?
Let's do it.
Who do you have?
So I went back and forth with this one a couple times. Initially, I had Jeff Blashill in here, and maybe it's because just I watch a lot more Red Wing games than most other teams. But for me, I'm going Bob Bugner from the San Jose Sharks.
Okay, yeah, he's definitely has not met expectations there. That's for sure.
Yeah, you look at where they sit in the standings, right? Obviously, I think you and I both, we had San Jose missing the playoffs. But right now sitting 32 points in the NHL, which is, obviously tied for the 4th worst in the NHL, down there with some teams like, they're just a couple points behind, ahead of a team like Anaheim, who another team we knew was going to be really, really bad. But since he's got there, it's been pretty bad. And you look at the amount of talent he has on this team, right? Logan Couture, Evander Kane, Thomas Hertl, guys, again, a lot of guys who, weren't going to blow you away in terms of he didn't have those Connor McDavids, those Leon Draisaitl type players.
Sure.
But he had some decent forwards to work with.
He only has Erik Karlsson.
Right. he's got Eric Carlson, Brett Burns, Mark Edward Vlasic, quality guys on the back end. And even Devin Dubnyk looked pretty decent coming into the season. Now, I do think Dubnyk's going to be on the trade block here in the next week, and you might see him get shifted out. But again, he had some decent pieces to work with that should have been better for second worst in their division, right? And it's just, he just can't seem to get guys going. He can't seem to really, the attitude of this team just sucks. And I look at it, I watched last night Eric Carlson's press conference, and they were talking about, you had one of your best offensive games of the year, or of your career last night. I think he had 4 points, whatever it was. And he just basically looked at him, just pissed off. He's like, nope, wasn't one of my best, bye. And that was it. And that kind of, for me, sums up the attitude of this team right now. Not to mention, I mean, you would think this team would have something to celebrate with a guy like Patrick Marleau, just 10 games away from, setting the all-time record for most games played. But no, they seem to have a bevy of problems, both, up front and the back end, and just can't ever seem to piece it together. Yeah,
San Jose, I think also the situation in that area be very hard. I mean, it's the way that everything's been locked down the whole time.
Sure.
That in LA, but LA is supposed to be bad. I know they had a good little start, but yeah, San Jose just, I mean, they're like on a whole nother level of bad, at least defensively. It's been surprising how bad, and that just, I think, probably tips towards the goaltending too. But all that money spent on defense, and they're one of the worst defensive teams in the league. It seems like, you talk about, hey, San Jose may not have those like absolute superstar franchise type of forwards. They're supposed to have a couple of defensemen that are franchise type defensemen. I mean, they have Norris Trophy winners on the back end.
Right.
But it seems like they aren't bought into Bob Boughner's system. And maybe that has a bit to do with COVID and not getting that whole entire training camp. And, he's a new coach, he came in last year, like halfway through the year, but it was a weird, I can't remember when he got brought in, when Todd McClellan was fired, but what did he have, a few months with the team before all COVID stuff happened, and then they didn't play again.
He got 37 games.
Yeah, for a year, and then there are definitely things that you can look at and say, well, there was a lot stacked against them, but at the same time, there's a lot stacked against almost every team, especially those teams that didn't get to go inside of the bubble. Like when you look at the teams that didn't get into the bubble last year, and you look at how they're doing this year, there are like most of them are still bad. Like Detroit, they weren't in the bubble. Buffalo, New Jersey, they weren't in the bubble. Who else was? Anaheim wasn't in the bubble. San Jose, LA, Ottawa, Edmonton. No, they were in the bubble. Yeah,
they were in the bubble. Yep.
There's the teams that weren't in the bubble. I think you're seeing maybe the result of basically not playing hockey for a year.
Very well, it could be. Yeah.
But my worst coach, I think your Bob Boughner is a great choice. I went back and forth on this, but I think in terms of expectations, I think we all thought that Vancouver would be better. I think we all thought that they would be at least competing for a playoff spot in this division. You wanted to see Quinn Hughes and Brock Besser, and I know Pettersson's been hurt. I know all that. I know that injuries certainly play a factor, but they just signed Thatcher Demko to a fatty 5-year, $25 million deal, and my first reaction to that was, why? Why'd you give him that much?
Yeah,
I don't think he's been that good at
Well, don't get me wrong. He's had a nice stretch, but
he's been fine. But he hasn't been lights out by any means. I don't know. $5 million for him seems high, especially since the cap isn't going to go up for a while.
Well, I will say I think they feel in the next year or two he's going to be elite, and I think they're trying to pay him a little bit more now to save those last 3 ish years or whatever. So
sure. But yeah, I'm going Travis Green. It's the way that the Vancouver. You look at Quinn Hughes. He he hasn't been able to. Well, I mean, he's 28 points in 37 games. It's nothing to slouch at. I mean, he'd be on pace for like basically a 60-point season, which is great. The minus 17, not so great. Just things appear to be sloppy for this team. They're minus 20 in terms of goal differential, which is second worst in that Canadian division, second only to, of course, Ottawa. They're also really not scoring many goals. I think they're sixth worst in the league in goals against, and then goals for, they're 19th, something like that. 22nd. So they're not scoring, they're not stopping much of anything. And the important thing, they just are not winning, and things have kind of fallen apart. They're not going to make the playoffs. I don't think there's any way they make the playoffs, especially with 5 games in hand for Montreal and 4 points up. They're not mathematically eliminated, but basically eliminated, and it's disappointing to see after what they were able to do in the bubble to now being so far out of the playoffs so early. I mean, we're barely halfway through the season. I mean, I guess we're like a little bit more, but you would think that they would be more competitive, and they just have not been.
Yeah, I'll give you that. I mean, it doesn't help much when you do have a star like Elias Pettersson go out. You have Tyler Toffoli going out. But
Pettersson still played 26 games, and in those 26 games, actually they played better since Pettersson's been hurt. Because in the last 10 games, they're 6-3-1 without Pettersson.
Yeah, that's very true. I'll give you that. But there's been no consistency out of this team all year long, regardless who's in the lineup. That's for sure.
Yeah, and Nate Schmidt hasn't been the impact player that I thought he would be. I thought Nate Schmidt would be much better, and much like what we saw when he was suspended at the beginning of the year for Vegas a couple years ago, and they were terrible out the bat, and then he came back and things really turned around. I thought that he would be that player for Vancouver, and he just hasn't been quite as good. So essentially he's a replacement for Tanev, and it just hasn't mixed as well with Quinn Hughes and giving him a partner. And so that's but I'd say that a lot of that is on the coaching. Like, those are things that a coach controls, who his star players play with, and managing injuries, and they just haven't been able to really do that. And when everyone's been healthy, they still aren't looking that great. So Vancouver for me, Travis Green, sorry, you win worst coach of the year.
Okay. Based
on expectations. I mean, obviously there's worse teams. We could very easily pick the Buffalo Sabres and just rag on them for everything. By the time you're listening to this, you'll probably know whether or not they lost 19 games in a row. We're recording this at 6 o'clock. So we don't know quite yet. They're playing tonight. Okay, what are next? What do you want to go?
Well, let's go worst GM, since we just talked about coaches.
Okay, let's hear who's your worst general manager.
Yeah, you had me thinking about it. My pick is Jim Benning from Vancouver.
Okay.
I hate to stay on the Vancouver train, but and again, I kind of take into account the way he set himself up at the beginning of the year. He let Jacob Markstrom, Chris Tanev go. 2 stalwarts on the back end that really helped make this team a playoff threat last year. And I thought, okay, cool. When they let those guys walk, I figured, okay, well, it must be because they want astronomical amount of money. Well, no, they really, compared to the guys they replaced them with Braden Holtby and Nate Schmidt, it wasn't that much more in terms of dollar and cents.
No, and they just paid Thatcher Demko $5 million a year, and they could have had Markstrom for $6 million.
Right. And again, maybe I see your understanding that, maybe you think Demko is your future goaltender, which is all fine and dandy, but at least, put yourself in a situation where you have to make that choice, where you have 2 elite goaltenders and you're like, crap, we have to pick one, and then go from there. But,
right.
Don't back yourself in a corner where you're like, okay, Demko, great. Now Demko has all the leverage in negotiations. He's like, good, you're going to need me because you don't have anybody else. So screw you guys. I'm taking more money.
Very true.
And that's what essentially happens. So, and then you look at that. Now he's put himself in a situation where he's got basically $20 million now in cap space next year to sign Quinn Hughes and Elias Pettersson, whom he has not re-signed by now, which that's, again, another reason why I just look at him and I say worst GM, because the team's playing terrible. And I don't know if maybe that has something to do with it. But I would have tried to lock these guys up sooner. Maybe that would have, taken their minds off one thing and helped them focus on, the task at hand. And, obviously we can poke, at all the other moves he's made, the years prior, signing guys like Anton Roussel, Brandon Sutter, bringing guys like that, Jay Beagle.
Yeah.
Just put them in a corner, and they don't really have an opportunity to be, to basically take that next step for these young kids because they don't have money to do it.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, it's, this is where I really lean towards Buffalo, even though it's not totally fair. I know that Kevin Adams has only been there for a year?
Right.
A total year. Yeah, I think October 11th is really his, when was his very first move as a GM was July 31st, 2020. So it was right around there. I mean, I understand he hasn't had a whole lot of time with this team. But when I look at, bringing in Taylor Hall, like maybe it changes if they're able to get something decent for Taylor Hall. But the return for Eric Stahl, not all that great, a 3rd and 5th round pick. And I guess I have to point to him. He's on the worst team. He's the general manager of the worst team, but at least they tied the record. They might beat it. They tied the record for the worst losing streak of all time. Not even the 74-75 Washington Capitals lost this many games in a row. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like in the age of parity, it is unbelievable. Even without Jack Eichel, I don't care. There's plenty of teams that are missing high-end players that manage to win a game once every 16 games. Every 17 games. I mean, it seems as though, like, to me, you're the GM. You're the one who sets the stage. You can go in. You can make the moves you need to. You can send guys down to the minors. You can do a whole lot of things. And whatever's going on there, I mean, it has to, like, something's going on from the very top down. And I think some of it is bringing in Taylor Hall. I think it was just a strange overestimation of what they had there. And when I look at Taylor Hall, I look at a guy that, like, I wouldn't give up a 1st round pick to get Taylor Hall, to be honest, because I think that he comes to a team, and I mean, Arizona was worse with Taylor Hall. I just don't know. He needs to be in the right situation where he does not have to be even close to the best player on that team, because there's something strange about him right now, where he just seems to go places and the team struggles. And he's supposed to be a goal scorer and he can't score any goals. So I wouldn't touch him. I would just say, no. I mean, if it's I just wouldn't want him on my team.
Not even for a 2nd rounder?
No. I don't want him for a 2nd rounder. I don't want them. I don't want him on my team. Not even for a 5th round pick. I don't want Taylor Hall on my team.
Okay. Hey, that's fair. And I mean, sometimes, when you're those teams at the top, you say, why mess with the chemistry, right?
Yep. And that's it.
So
and
I get it.
Yeah, obviously there's some teams going to throw something at them and try to get them, but it just...
Yeah, I'm still calling Boston, so...
Okay. What award do we have next?
Let's do worst rookie.
Worst rookie. Is this easy?
This is easy for me.
That's probably the easiest one on the whole list.
Yeah, I got it. Alexis Lafreniere.
Yes.
I mean...
Yes, been terrible.
Yeah, he's averaging 8 minutes of ice time. I'm sorry, he's a little bit more than 8 minutes, but on Sunday last week against Washington, he only got 8 minutes of ice time. Only 10 points so far through 35 games. Just has not looked, like he looks completely lost, out of place. And when you look at, the way that top 6 is rolling in New York, you would figure he could get into that and at least have a little bit better production. I mean, don't get me wrong, Capo Caco's not playing super great right now, but he still at least looks like he knows what he's doing out there. And to me, Alexis Lafreniere just looks lost, honestly.
Yeah, and I think a lot, I feel bad for him because obviously COVID has something to do with this. In my opinion, you look at normally these guys would get these rookie camps, and you get a full training camp, and you really get to immerse yourself in the team culture. And my guess is it just has not happened for him. And I do feel bad for all the rookies, guys that were drafted last year, and they're coming in. It would be a difficult process. I mean, I know, you've got Kirill Kaprizov up at the top of rookie scoring. He's going to win Rookie of the Year. I don't think there's any doubt about that, but he's also 35 years old, so.
Yeah, well, yeah, I will say that. And when you look at these rookies, right, the ones that are successful are the guys who have been, like, for example, Kaprizov has been playing over in Russia for the last few seasons, so they've had time to get acclimated with big teams, right? So a lot of these, the rookies right now that we're seeing that are being successful have been with their teams and in the system for a year or two at least, and he's just kind of thrown into the fire. Just figure it out. Let's go. No training camp. Let's do it.
Right. And then it's not totally fair, but I do really, if I wasn't going to pick Kaprizov, I really like the way that Tim Stützle has come along, but this is the worst Alexis Lafreniere. I'll just call him Alex, but
Alex.
He has been. He is not Matt X, but like when you get drafted first overall, you're a forward, and this wasn't like a Heischer kind of year where it was like, okay, there's a lot of guys that maybe could be taken first overall, and there's no superstar franchise like this. He was touted to be the next Austin Matthews, like that level of player, and it's not too often that a guy is touted to be, all right, here's the next great player in the league, and he comes in and he sucks. It doesn't happen where that guy ends up being really good later on. I don't know what's going to happen, but if maybe going back to that worst GM, maybe the worst GM is on the New York Rangers, because the way that they have drafted very high, first overall pick, Jeff Gorton, first overall, second overall. They had opportunities to go other ways, and neither pick has been very good. But I'll give him the Artemi Panarin, so I can't totally hate on him, because that was a beauty.
Yeah.
Okay, what we have? MVP or LVP, least valuable player?
LVP.
What other?
Worst goalie and worst team left.
So
your pick.
Yes, worst goalie. Let's go worst goalie.
Okay. Boy, my favorite category. For me, it's easy to bash on every goaltender in Ottawa right now.
That's true.
I'm going to say Carter Hart.
Carter Hart, yes, I agree. He's my worst goaltender as well. He's been absolutely brutal. When
you look at goals saved above expected, he is second to last at a negative 20.7, and the only goaltender worse than him is Matt Murray in Ottawa at a negative 20.9. I mean,
and Matt Murray is on a team that wasn't supposed to be good anyways.
Right. You look at the goaltenders around him. Thomas Greiss, again, terrible team. Ryan Miller, terrible team. Martin Jones, same story left and right. Again, Carter Hart's on a decent team, a Philadelphia team that, again, I expected to probably make a push for the playoffs and be, a contender here, at least to get in the dance. But they're actually, now I hear, TSN, I love watching their little trade bait videos, but they're basically talking now that they're going to go shopping for a goaltender because they're thinking about actually giving Carter Hart time away from the team to regather himself. His goals against is above 4. Above 4.
That's like an average goalie in 1981.
Yeah, what the frick?
An .869 save percentage. I don't think I've
ever seen anything that bad in my entire life. And this is a guy who last year looked good, looked comfortable, looked like he was ready to steal the show.
He looked great in the playoffs. I
don't know what's happening, and I mean, it wouldn't shock me if we come out here. He's had some injury issues or something, but I doubt it. I mean, honestly, I just think this is just a mental thing because this position is so hard to play at such a young age. For a guy that's barely into his 20s, to try to figure it out like this. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it's just a mental thing for sure.
Okay. Carter Hart is our consensus worst goalie of the year. And I don't think it's going to get any better. I hope it does for him. You don't ever want a guy to have to stay the worst goalie of the year. Maybe it'll get better, and we'll give the end of the year to Matt Murray. Who knows? Worst team. I mean, I'm going with Buffalo all the way. 6 freaking wins in 34 games. They might end up having what's the fewest amount of wins in a season? 8?
8.
8 is the fewest. I mean, granted, that's over the course of 82 game or 80 games or whatever it was, 72 games in the 1974. This will only be 56. But if they only win once in the next, I don't see that. Once in the next 22 games, if they only win one time.
Oh, gosh.
That would be terrible. That's just how bad that 74-75 team was. But they might not get double digits in wins.
Yeah, it would not shock me. And I'm with you. They're my pick. I mean, you look at how bad they've been top to bottom, and it's clear they, fire their coach. And, boy, I mean, yes, no Jack Eichel is definitely going to affect your team, but they shouldn't be this bad without that guy. They
are averaging less than barely more than 2 goals a game. 71 goals in 34 games.
Yeah, you have a guy who, last year, Rasmus Dahlin, a potential Rookie of the Year candidate, a guy who, is supposed to be a next, superstar defenseman. You have Taylor Hall, a former Hart Trophy winner, Eric Stahl, a former 40-goal scorer. You have all these guys.
Ristolainen's not that bad. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. He's actually not playing. He wasn't playing.
Sam Reinhart had a good year last year. Yeah.
So you had pieces to say, okay, cool, this team can be okay, right? Maybe not great, maybe not good, but they can be okay. And they are absolutely terrible.
Yeah. They made me look like a fool.
They really did.
I picked them to make the playoffs, and here we are.
I'm going to rub that one in your face.
One of the worst teams ever. They might be. There's a possibility that they might be the worst team since the Atlanta Thrashers in 99-2000. I believe the Atlanta Thrashers had 14 wins over 82 games and 28 points. That's before overtime lost points. So
right.
If you can even come close to that now with overtime losses, it's going to be interesting to see what happens, because it's tremendous. It's tremendous how bad they are. And I feel bad rooting for them to lose. I just don't want to do that, but sometimes it is it's like when the Tigers were going for 100 losses, or 120 losses or whatever the record was when they were chugging towards that. And you're like, I feel bad for them, but I really want to see this happen.
Right.
All right. Last one, the old LVP. The old luxury vinyl planking, and the least valuable player.
Yeah, I hate to beat a dead horse, but I got to stick in Buffalo and give this to Jeff Skinner.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
I hate to do it to him, and I could have easily given this to him last year as well had we had these awards, but the guy, freaking 30-plus games, only 3 goals, 1 assist so far. And if you look right now in terms of cost, in terms of dollar amounts per point, he is costing this team $2.25 million per point right now. That is what he's worth.
Oh, that's funny.
Yes, there are some guys in the league that, cost more per point when you look at it, right? Obviously, Louis Eriksson's an easy one to point to. He's only got 1 point, but he's only played 5 games.
And he's not, no one thinks he's good anymore. There's no expectation for him.
Exactly. And that's the thing. And it's just, I can't see anybody worse off than him right now at this point in terms of cost per point. And it's not going to get any easier because he doesn't have Jack Eichel. He doesn't have
Jeff Eichel either.
Yeah, no. And he doesn't have Eric Stahl. He has absolutely no center support right now at this point. And you're trying to score goals at $9 million. Sorry, see ya. You're donezo, buddy. It's not looking pretty. I mean, there's no easy way to say it. And he's taken 63 shots, so he's scoring a goal once every 20 shots. That's pretty terrible, even for his career average. It's just. I almost feel bad for him, to be quite honest.
Almost.
But in another sense, I don't, because you're making $9 million. So figure it out.
Yeah, in terms of dollars and what's expected of you, it's pretty bad. Yes, Jeff Skinner, absolutely. He's on such a bad team that it almost, like, if he was a little better, it still would be horrible in Buffalo. I am giving the only award of the night to another player who already received one. My worst defensive forward is also my least valuable player, and that is Patrick Laine on the Columbus Blue Jackets.
Wow, I love it.
Yes, I mean, I think the Columbus Blue Jackets, they have a legitimate chance at making the playoffs, and they, I think, would be in a playoff spot if Patrick Laine was scoring the way that we know he can, if he was on a 40-goal pace and he was producing offense, playing a good defensive game, I think that makes up a few points at least for this team, and I think that they're in a better position and maybe sitting in a playoff spot instead of Nashville. So I really think Patrick Laine, he's the ticket for this team. Now, I will say, Patrick Laine, you can have a little drop down, like a little arrow that goes down and then to the right underneath him, and throw Max Domi into that too, because Max Domi has not been good, and he needs to be better for this Blue Jackets team, because you dish out Dubois and Max Domi's your guy. Like, it's Laine and Dubois, and neither of them are really putting up anything of significance. So that team, I'd say, is they're one of them where you go, they haven't really had horrible injuries, and yet here they are. They're out of pretty far out of a playoff spot.
Yeah, and the crazy thing for Columbus, right? We talk about it, top 4 in each division. They're 3 points behind a Nashville team and Chicago team for that 4th spot. But as bad as they've looked, a guy like exactly Patrick Laine hasn't looked great. Max Domi hasn't looked great. At some point, if you're Columbus, do you start selling pieces? Because I'm afraid they're going to go through another year where they did the same thing with Panarin and Duchesne, and they just didn't sell off their free agents.
Right,
and then
we got David Savard that they could deal. Yeah,
right. Do they think they're going to make the playoffs and keep David Savard around and keep a guy like Riley Nash or even Nick Foligno, who I keep hearing rumors to go to the New York Islanders, right? He would be a perfect fit in Barry Trotz's system. But,
with losing Andersley for sure. Yeah, I mean, right. It would be tough to, he's been their captain for a long time. And I believe he came over in the Rick Nash deal, didn't he?
He did, yeah. Yeah. I believe so.
He's been there for a long time. There's your connection to Rick Nash still. Yeah, I wonder what this team will do. Part of me says, John Tortorella has kind of outlived his usefulness here, and it's time to find somebody who can shape some of these younger guys and use their offensive talents. Otherwise, you're wasting away Seth Jones. He's got 1 year after this, and he's a UFA. So either you're going to have to pay him probably $12 million a year, or get out.
Right, and that's the thing. You have to make a choice now. Like, do we hit the reset button? Or maybe not even necessarily. They don't have to reload. They just have to get rid of their head coach, move a couple other pieces around, and maybe they can put this thing back together quick enough to where Seth Jones says, okay, cool, you know what? At 27 years old, I'll re-sign here, right?
Yeah,
I'll sign an extension.
And that's been the problem. That's been the problem there for 20 years, is that nobody wants to play there. Nobody wants to sign there in their later years, unless they're kind of over the hill and not doing it. Now, a lot of their star players have left. A lot of them. So they need to figure that out quick. All right. Well, those are the Futility Awards of 2021, halfway through the season, and we'll bring you these again. Let us know who you think is the worst at everything. At OT Hockey Talk is our Twitter and Instagram handle. Justin, any final thoughts before we ride off into the horrible sunset that is watching the Buffalo Sabres potentially lose another game?
Yeah, enjoy the game, and then everybody, just to make sure you enjoy the holiday weekend.
Yeah, happy Easter, Good Friday to you, all that good stuff. You're playing at church this weekend, yeah?
I am. That is correct.
Is that Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or just Saturday, Sunday?
No, so it's just Saturday, Sunday, but I'm actually playing at one of the regional campuses. So
oh, okay, nice.
Little easier schedule this weekend.
Beauty. All right, well, enjoy that, and all of our listeners, enjoy the weekend, the longer weekend, and we'll talk to you soon. last one. The regular season starts
6 days.
in 6 days on Wednesday.
Freaking A.
Wednesday, January 13th. We will do something for it. You'll find out of what we're going to do, but we'll be watching some games, and we'll talk to you soon.